Thank you so much, Paul. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to say that today we were asked to talk on a topic that needs to be in line with innovation and transformation of the market. And today I would like to sort of present what the MEPOL has been doing in the past in terms of our innovation framework as well as the transformation. But first of all, we are actually producing a country which is called Papua New Guinea. At the moment, what we can see is that the industry is facing different challenges. As I think that we heard also in Africa, we are new frontiers that are being explored, and if there's more suitable agricultural land around. And that brings a lot of diverse questions on sustainability along with that. What we have seen is that the RSPO standard can play an important role for emerging countries to address actually the environmental and prosperity elements of development, and that includes also the free, prior and informed consent elements in this process. So my presentation outline for today, I would like to talk you through a little bit the sustainable agriculture in Papua New Guinea and the RSPO context. Then I would like to change to the topic on how we came to our sort of innovation and our framework in that, and that is based on a plan, do, check and act, and that is the sort of ISO 14001 framework, but not to go too much into an ISO framework, but more showing you how we have approached our process in transforming into a sustainable production. And of course, this comes with a long journey. So first of all, I think we heard that in the previous presentations as well, we do have a few key concerns that are part of our day-to-day operational challenges. I think we've heard them also through our working groups, and that is part of the greenhouse gases and our carbon cycles, deforestation, biodiversity, social concerns, smallholders and communities. How do we create engagement and outreach, better management practices so that we make sure that our yields are increasing on the existing plantations that we've got. Traceability is a component that became more and more important over time, and overall, governance and assurance is something that is part of the transparency in this process. MEPOL sees sustainability not as a destination, but it's a direction, and it helps us in making sure that we achieve our milestones that we need to achieve. In Papua New Guinea, land is owned by the people. It's 97% in Papua New Guinea is customary land, and 88% in the Solomons, where we also operate, is also customary land. So which means that people are relying on their own for their livelihoods on their own land, and there are different systems in place that can be used to utilize the land together with the landowners, and it's called the lease-back system. The main principles of this system are free, prior and informed consent, and along this way we have to incorporate the previous concerns that we saw as our carbon cycles, our HEVs, our biodiversity. All those elements need to be included in this framework. We see that PNG is growing. There are many different sectors, including mining, forestry and oil palm, that are picking up. In this context in Papua New Guinea, we know that the customary traditions are very important, and that we need to include them in our day-to-day operations to make sure that people are having the right to bring their customs to this development. We need to look at in Papua New Guinea on how we can guide this process. We see that the RSPO is definitely the standard for this, and we're trying to communicate with the governments and with our other partners in this process on how we can bring sustainable production as the main priority for this development. So we do see that there is a question out there from our landowners as well that they do want to see oil palm happening. But we do need to make sure that it fits into the landscape that we've got and to avoid that deforestation is going to be having an impact on the current status of the land in Papua New Guinea. As I mentioned, we have followed a process whereby we have followed the framework of ISO 14001. So we said we do first plan out what our objectives are, what do we have to look into to make sure that we set out that we do include the concerns that we have and to make sure that we can actually achieve those objectives. So that is part of the first step in the process. So what are the objectives and requirements so we can draft a program that includes the timelines that we have to achieve. For instance, the first process was, we started in West New Britain with our certification, and that included a lot of understanding and transformation of our managers' approaches. So the planning was an important part of that. Doing it is another thing. It requires indeed the setting the responsibilities in that process, making sure that you have the resources to do so, and also assigning authority to people, to the right people in the process to make the decisions and to help with the implementation. So planning is one, doing it is a second, but then also making sure that we follow up is of course part of the checks, as we say. So we set our key performance indicators that help us to monitor our progress. So monitoring and measuring helps us in actually showing that we are on track and that we are implementing the system the way that it is supposed to be. If it doesn't work, the second step is of course how do we correct it? And that is done through our corrective and preventive actions. Correcting is one, making sure that it doesn't happen again is the preventive side and the cycle of that. At the end of the year, we try to sit down and say, okay, let's review how our actions are really being part of a smart performance. Did they actually address the issues that were out there? Were we able to implement what we're supposed to implement? And do we see that we have to make changes again? So this whole plan, do, check, act cycle is part of the following framework. And we said we have a framework that addresses the performance side of things, and then of course we have the side of the reporting on it and making sure that we can show that there is transparency in the system. So doing that was one. Secondly, reporting was the next step. And then engagement on what we are doing is the third step. I mean, of course, it's part of the whole cycle. You start with the engagement from day one. But making sure that you also communicate to your people and to the stakeholders in there what you have been doing, how you have tried to address it, and make it part back of your corrective actions again if your stakeholders are also telling you that things need to be done differently. So that is what we call disclosure. And disclosure was done through, for instance, our sustainability report. And I just want to show you sort of the steps in there. So indeed, it started all off with our ISO certification in 2004. And then we had a sustainability handbook that outlines our policies. The policies for people on the work floor, but also for our outside, for our stakeholders to understand what our policies are about. RSPO certification for West New Britain we achieved in September 2008, and we were the second in the world to achieve the certification. The next step was what we said, how do we make all the steps in this process transparent and how do we communicate them? So we decided to start with the sustainability reporting, and our first sustainability report came out in November 2008. So sustainability handbook for us helps us to communicate and show what our actions have been and where we are successful and where we are less successful. So it's a transparency cycle that we need to include there. The second one came out in 2009, and that followed up on the first initial steps that we set and reporting back on how far we are with the progress. In 2009, we joined SEDEX. This is, some of you might know, but it reports on our achievements on also the social side, in terms of workers, in terms of housing, in terms of our gender balance. So this is also part of helping us to report and transparency elements. We have, our next target is 2012 for our next sustainability report. I see that it's not completely up to date, but we have, next year we will have our third sustainability report out, and we hope to be able to update you on our progress so far. The journey, we can say that the journey to transform is a difficult journey, but we are starting to be able to be more involved with our stakeholders and also communicate what we have been doing so far and what the RSPO, how the RSPO helped us in this process. So the engagement and involving of all your stakeholders is part of your transformation. Secondly, the models that we have been developing for our smallholders to be included in our segregated supply chain. That was a very important step for us. That was part of our innovation program as well, as to say. Yesterday I've been presenting during the smallholder pre-cluster as well, and some of you might have been there and seen that we do try to bring in different models for the sites, for the different sites where we operate. So this is a very important part of our journey. Training and awareness, of course, on your best practices, but also financial management towards our stakeholders, our communities, our smallholders, brings back an option to include your communities in better practices. Adopting land use planning approaches, so how can we make sure that we develop areas that indeed look at low carbon as well as no high conservation values, or where we are able to actually continue our growth. We have to refine every year different protocols in this process. One of them is free, prior, and informed consent. When we started off, we had like one-page management guideline, as we call it. We ended up now by 10 pages, so you can see it's work in progress, that's for sure. And along this way, it is important to find your partners on this journey. This journey resulted now in something that we called the segregated supply chain for us. We opened up a refinery in Liverpool, but doing this was, for us, part of our stakeholders had to be included in this process, and that were our smallholders. So this whole segregated supply chain was part of the innovation and the transformation our company went through. Seeing that I have 49 minutes, I think I will say thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me, and looking forward to your questions.